Joe talks about Joe. And now, your host, Joe Slepsky.
Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to Joe on Joe. It's me, your host, Joe Slepsky, and we are back this week with another episode of G.I. Joe Renegades. I haven't settled on like an extreme kind of. I don't know, like how do you growl? You have to like growl out Renegades or something. I don't know. I'm having a lot of fun watching this show. Like I was been saying, it's been a long time since we've done the watch along episodes, so this is getting me back in the groove. I'm really enjoying it. I've gotten great feedback from you guys. A lot of people, have been asking for years, like, "Hey, when are you going to do Renegades, etc., etc." So it's really nice to see that, see the feedback and hear from you guys. So, while we're talking about that, if you're out there and if you want to be a guest host on the Joe and Joe Renegades coverage, just reach out to me on social media at Joe and Joe Pod, or you can send me an email to joeandjoepod@gmail.com. And we'll do it super easy. We'll do it over Zoom, and we'll watch an episode of Renegades together, and it will be a lot of fun. Now, I'm not going to belabor the point this week. It is a lot of fun on the show, but this week is a serious topic. Serious topic because it is an amazing topic. We are talking about a book that is both uplifting because it's honest and depressing because it's also real. I met our guest today at friend of the show Paul Galliano's birthday. You guys hear me name drop that massive G.I. Joe fan all the time, and a frequent contributor to the show. We were celebrating his birthday, and he introduced me to his friend, my guest today, who we started talking G.I. Joe a little bit, and I started asking what he did. And he says, "Oh, I write books." And I'm like, "Oh, what's it about?" And he told me he wrote this book called How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. And that kind of sums up what's so important about this book. Like he's not burying the lead with that. That's why it's such a great title, because it doesn't try to fool you. It doesn't try to do the propaganda that the book itself talks about, which is an amazing read so far. It is equal parts depressing. And every time I read a little bit, I turn to my wife and I tell her a little bit of what I read, and she just gets frustrated. But then I read more because it is an absolutely great read. It's a very easy read. And I want to introduce our guest this week, Mr. Samuel Spitale, author of How to Win the War on Truth. So welcome to Joe and Joe, Samuel.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
It is excellent to have you here. I meant what I said. It's really well written. It's really engaging, and it's really depressing. But depressing in that way.
The truth can often be very dismal. Yeah.
My father was very fond of saying the phrase, the truth is seldom kind, is the phrase that he used very frequently. And it is, like that. Yeah, it's very true in this case. It's a wonderfully written book. It delves into chapter by chapter all the various stages of the P word, propaganda, even though it's actually not in the title of the book. That's primarily what this book is talking about. And it can take a form in a lot of different ways. What caused you to want to write a book about propaganda? What brought you there? Like, where did you come from? And then what made you go, this is the book I want to write?
Sure. I feel like, I don't know, I kind of stumbled on the idea. So much of it came out of conversations with friends and family starting around 2016. That election cycle had a lot of craziness and a lot of BS floating around. And, to me, because I'm in the media, I'm a writer, I'm very dialed into what's going on. A lot of that stuff kind of seemed self-evident. But the more I talked to friends and family back home in Louisiana, where I grew up, the more I realized just how many of them, believed something that wasn't true, whether it was corporate propaganda, political propaganda. There's no shortage of BS these days. And so I kind of became obsessed with, how do you help people understand that so much of what we believe has been sold to us by someone. And so that was kind of the goal with the book. How do we peel all these layers back to help people see that, some of the, most deeply held beliefs or things we take for granted were manufactured and sold to us like any other consumer product. So my background was in mass communication. I went to LSU, got a bachelor and master's in mass comm. But after college, I went to work for Lucasfilm on Star Wars product development for over a decade,
Oh, we're gonna
and then
talk about
left that
that,
to
Sam.
pursue. Oh, we can talk about that too.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun, and then left to kind of pursue my own work, my own writings, from storytelling and script writing to nonfiction books and essays. And so the book kind of, I found myself writing more and more as the years went on, less about, fanciful stories or fun, comedies, and more about real world issues like inequality and socioeconomics and, and corporate BS. And then that's kind of, became eventually kind of turned into the idea for the book. When I mentioned it to people before I even knew it was really an idea for a book, everybody's ears kind of perked up. They thought it was a really good idea. And so I, just kind of worked on it. And a friend introduced me to Alan Wincup, the illustrator for the book. The book's fully illustrated. So I think of it as a graphic novel, although it's probably more of an illustrated book. But yeah, there are hundreds of images in there. Because I wanted a sense of humor and whimsy that the art could bring to it.
And it does.
Which I feel like worked
Let's
well.
take a quick sojourn there. It absolutely has whimsy. It's a very lighthearted style, very open artistically, and very editorial driven, like in an editorial
Yes.
page in a newspaper. And then really illustrative over the points. Every single page has some type
Yeah.
of illustration. Sometimes it's a graph, but even the graph is kind of fun. To talk about the points that
A
you're
lot of
making on that page. A
infographics.
lot of infographics, yeah. So an absolute brilliant choice on that, and great work by Alan.
Yeah, well, it was a great way to bring in humor because a lot of the
Yeah,
facts and information could be kind of dreary. So it was a great way to add some satire. So yeah, I like to think my sense of humor is inspired by like The Daily Show or some of the the fake news programming that's more real news today than the news.
yeah.
Um,
And
and
before
so
before we go further, I want to point out the title, "How to Win the War on Truth." I really want to, regardless of where you fall in the spectrum, and listeners, I know I got people from all walks of life out there. What I've seen is all sides of the political spectrum, even though your book covers a lot more than politics, and we're going to talk about that too. There's so much about just regular advertising that is just eye-opening, and which is also another great reason to read this book. But I think the common thread in all the charged political debates today is the other side is lying. I can't trust what the other side is saying. I can't trust what this politician is saying. And what is that but a war on truth and a war on the common perception of reality? Is that the kind of thing you were trying to combat with this?
yeah, absolutely. Hopefully, giving people some of the tools to help them see um, how information is manipulated and all of the basically all the tricks of the trade. Excuse me, all of the tricks of the trade that marketers or political strategists or anyone in those industries, all of the things they use to get us to buy a product or buy a politician or a policy that maybe works against our best interest.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the book is kind of broken down into a few sections, and the first is media literacy because just because we consume a lot of media doesn't mean we're very media literate.
Sure.
And media and what media literacy means today has changed a lot in just the last 10 or 20 years. When you used to be able to, you'd consume media, you'd turn on the TV at night, you knew what was entertainment, you knew what was news programming, and you knew what was advertising,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Commercial break, advertising, late night news, the TV show, entertainment. But on our Instagram feeds or Facebook feeds, you don't know the difference. They all look the same.
Yep.
And so it's not as easy to tell advertising from entertainment, from news, from propaganda. And so, part of the idea with the book was to help people distinguish, between the different forms of propaganda, which basically includes, any message that's trying to sell us something and not necessarily sell us the truth.
Yeah.
Journalism's concerned with getting to the truth, but none of those other things are.
Well, you talk about the
Marketing,
fairness
advertising,
doctrine.
PR.
You talk about the fairness doctrine in your book, and that is such a moment of inflection for all of this.
Yeah.
And how that was struck down.
Yeah.
Can
So
you
the
elaborate
fairness,
a little bit on that?
yeah, sure. So the fairness doctrine was, something that the FCC, they never even really had to enforce it, but it basically mandated that if you were to speak of a controversial issue on the air, then you also had to platform the other side of the issue. So, in other words, you couldn't have the cigarette company saying their cigarettes are safe without also having, a surgeon general or someone talking about how they're not. Excuse me. So, and so that was in place for decades. And then in the 1980s, um, Congress tried to codify it into law, and basically the Reagan administration killed it, um, perhaps from pressure from, um, media. Media entities that were not in the states that wanted to enter the states. And so once the fairness doctrine was struck down, almost overnight, you had partisan radio. We all can remember how partisan radio was in the 90s, if you're old enough to remember the 90s.
Yeah.
And that didn't exist until the very end of the 80s. And literally overnight, you had partisan programming that almost operates more like a partisan propaganda outlet, because things stopped becoming news and started just becoming partisan propaganda. And then, of course, then that went to TV, and now that's the internet. So it's kind of a a lack of regulation is what allows that type of indoctrination.
Yeah.
And that was put in place after the World Wars because propaganda was so bad and so out of hand that, the fairness doctrine was an attempt to make sure that, what happened abroad couldn't really happen here.
For me, what was eye-opening was that, and I've known that hasn't been in place for a while, but there was a long period of time that I thought it was. Like, I didn't realize it goes all the way back to the Reagan era of where that got, broken down.
Yeah.
I know people still think today that there's some kind of fairness doctrine that, if you have this person on your show, you have to have them on your show and all that stuff. But that's just not the case.
Yeah. Well, that's more theater.
Yeah.
Because they're not, so part of the problem with news, with the cable news model is that, you have to attract viewers, and you're not attracting viewers by just delivering monotone news like Walter Cronkite once did. You're competing for viewership in a different way, and they're privately owned. And so they've kind of adopted this entertainment model, which means you always have to have conflict. And if you watch any drama at night, conflict is what drives the stories, right?
Mm-hmm. I don't think
criminal.
Yeah, I don't think MSNBC has turned off their breaking news chyron in 15
none
years.
Of them,
none of them, really.
So you need conflict to drive it. And so what does that mean? That means having two people arguing or talking that appear to be different sides of the debate, but the fact that there's two of them makes you think that whatever they're arguing about has two sides, and information usually does not. And often those two people arguing, one's mostly true and the other one's just BS. They're just justifying positions or political positions or what have you.
Very often they're paid to do so.
Right, that's their job,
and not even paid.
punditry.
And not even paid by the news network that they're talking on. They may get paid for their appearance, but paid by other parties to spin that side of the conversation.
Spin. They have talking points. They're there to sell something. So they're both selling something. And I had to stop watching cable news because I can't. I just can't. watch it anymore because of that false dichotomy. And oftentimes the anchors are not, they're not holding them accountable. They're letting them lie.
Mm-hmm.
Occasionally they correct them, but the thing is you can lie without even having to say a lie. So what I notice a lot on, and CNN was doing this a lot. Like they would have someone who say didn't speak the lie, but they would speak an opinion poll where so many percent of people think this,
Mm-hmm.
and that what they think is the lie. So there's so many methods for them to sneak the lie in a
Mm-hmm.
way that where they're not stating they think that, or that that's the truth, but look, 70% of people think this, and no one ever says yes, but because you've been lying to them and telling them to
Right.
think that.
And reporting like that, and I know what you're talking about, it feeds into your own, as a human being, it feeds into your ego. Because then you go, well, I believe, like, I'm a part of that. I'm on that side of the equation. They're talking about me, versus this is a news thing that happened today. They're not talking about me. They're talking about someone else entirely. But now I'm a part
Yeah.
of the story because I'm on that team and I feel that way. Um, and it is all most, yeah, you
Right.
talk
And
so much
it's
more
the team
eloquently about it.
mentality.
Yeah.
You're right, because a lot of the partisan programming, they're catering to that team mentality.
Right.
There's kind of these emotional beats that you want to hit, that they hit. And they want the viewer to feel enraged at the right people, and then to see that the, their opposition get handed, defeated, um, and lose the argument, and then that then the viewer feels kind of has that tension release. And yeah, it's very orchestrated. um and what it's lacking, though, are the fact finders and the
Mm-hmm.
people that should just be relaying information. And and that's what's lacking, and that's why I had to just stop watching cable news, because it's so messed up.
Yeah.
um
In your term of being media literate, and you're talking about fact finding, one of the, I think, scourges of modern, we'll say, onlineness, and this cuts across both sides, is the do your research crowd.
oh yeah, I'm
What?
glad you brought that up,
Yeah.
because I've learned a few things since writing the book about this. So part of the problem with so much of the misinformation online is because of the way the algorithms work. So that traces back to like 2009, 2010. So I don't know if you remember, when we first used to use social media, we would see all these posts by our family and friends. So it
Yep.
was kind of like the last thing they posted is what we would see in our feed.
Yep.
So that started to change around '09 and 2010. Like Twitter, Facebook, they introduced like the like button and the retweet button. And so what this allowed users to do is basically interact more with posts they responded to. But so as far as the platforms were concerned, they were able to see what posts are people responding the most to, and then kind of monetize that. So if you have two different posts, and one is a boring factual article, but the other one is like some moral panic about something that doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
The moral panic that doesn't exist is going to get everybody's attention. Everybody's
Mm-hmm.
going to forward it. They're all going to comment. They're going to argue, and they're going to stay online on that platform longer.
Yep.
Which means the platform can charge more advertising dollars.
Yep.
And more eyeballs. And so so the way the algorithms worked, it stopped showing us stuff from our family and friends, and started showing us things that were most likely to engage us emotionally. And that means things that were going to make us angry, spiteful, hateful, um, fearful, all the negative emotions, right? Because humans have a negativity bias. We're wired to respond more more heavily to negative stimuli than positive stimuli. So it's no coincidence that as these new algorithms took off and started flooding the zone with BS, and hate speech and all of this other stuff, democracies around the globe started to decline.
Mm-hmm.
So you had more attacks on immigrants, more political rhetoric that incited violence, people being more siloed in information spheres. And so, anyway, so the point of all this, though, is that, you mentioned do your own research. So your algorithm is only going to show you things that fall in line with what you've already been liking and seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, let's say if you liked or interacted with an anti-immigrant post, then it's just going to show you more anti-immigrant related posts, and they're going to be more extreme to get a stronger reaction out of you. Like there was a sociologist that did a study, and she was researching Trump rallies, and YouTube would start auto-populating more and more racist and violent videos. And she was researching how those algorithms worked. So anyway, the algorithm's only going to show us stuff that emotionally engages us. And, studies show that's things that are that elicit anger, hate, fear, all the negative emotions. So
and in that, if I can interject there,
yeah,
in those moments, because of the anonymity of the internet, the people that were sharing those videos, or like starting the engagement and starting the saying provocative things, weren't necessarily human. They're not necessarily human beings.
No, they're bots.
Or
they're
bots,
crazy people.
or they're crazy people. Yeah, or they're crazy people, or they're bad actors. Foreign people that want a specific outcome.
Absolutely,
and that is also the belies the do your own research crowd, because you can't trust anyone. You can't trust anyone.
Well,
now you have verified accounts on these things that you can just pay for.
Yeah,
to make you look more official. And most people don't even understand what that means.
No, well, and the do your own research, though, is a specific like propaganda tool, because again, the way our algorithms work, me and you could search for Google the same thing.
Yeah.
But your results are going to be indicative of what you already believe, because it knows the sites you go to and the things you already like. So it's going to be different for me depending on what I already believe. So let's say if you're somebody that's gone down the rabbit hole and you already believe, crazy stuff, that the podcast you just listened to, they know that when they say do your own research, it's just going to verify that Google search is only going to verify everything they just said, because if you're listening to that podcast, then you're already in the rabbit hole. So political strategists and these influencers and podcast personalities have been deliberately using that because they understand how the algorithms work. So when they say do your own research, they're just trying to instill confirmation bias. So they know you're going to search and it's going to tell you whatever they just said, no matter how wrong or inaccurate it is.
It is wild. It is so wild. And in one of the words you've been talking a lot about emotions, and early on you talked about the word enrage. And I believe in the book you say, like, the bad news or the fear news is your body reacts stronger to it than good news. And that goes all the way back to like evolution, because the scary thing was something you had to react to in a fast, I have to make a decision and do something now. Am I understanding that right?
Yep. It's goes back to our fight or flight response, right? If our ancestors encountered a tiger or a bear, they had to decide immediately, do I fight or do I flee? And so, it's part of the reason why we have emotions, is to help us make decisions. And so we're still hardwired this way today. So we can respond to something in that way, even if that something in real life does not warrant it.
Mm-hmm. And I believe it's fast thinking and slow thinking, right? And the fast thinking is tend to be associated more with that emotional energy, and the slow thinking is much harder to do, and that's actually understanding all angles of concepts.
Yes, so right, because the emotions basically override the slow thinking and the critical, which is critical thinking. It's thinking through something. And so the emotions will make you reactive, where you don't think, you just feel. And that's what so much of the propaganda and the BS, the manipulation comes from those emotional appeals. So that's why we see posts, go back to the immigrant example. That's why we see posts about, immigrants are taking your jobs,
Yeah.
and not posts about how big ag hires immigrants under the table because they can pay them a sub minimum wage.
Oh, so let's use that as a brief example of how deeply you get into these topics. And listeners, again, I think we're both doing a solid job of this is just looking at the facts and looking at the neutrality of it. You talk about the eras where, and this spans multiple styles of presidents over the decades, when we've cracked down on immigration, like really buffed it up. It's caused more financial problems with immigration because they're not allowed to kind of migrate in and out. When the borders are a little more open, per se, to use a phrase, they're seasonal workers. So they come and they go, and they're not as much of a, I'll use the word burden, on some of our resources. And even that, they're not a burden on our resources because they pay more into the tax base than they pull out.
Oh yeah, they pay like hundreds of millions
it's crazy.
into the tax system that they do not get out.
But
and so most of the myths we believe about immigrants, using contributing to the housing crisis,
Right,
or committing crime, or anything that paints a marginalized group in a negative light, is usually propaganda.
Yeah, and it's
for the most part.
And to really pull the emotion out of it, everything you're putting in this book, and these are all backed up by actual statistics, and actual looking at, comparing value, dollar amounts and incoming revenue versus outgoing, and, migration numbers and this and that, with the actual policies that were in place at the time. And when you look at that, you go, oh yeah, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. But the appeal to say, here's something scary about whatever the issue is, whether it's education, or whether it's vaccines, or whether it's immigration, the scare factor gets people more riled up. And all of the idea of propaganda, that starts with, of all people, Sigmund Freud's nephew.
Yes. So he took his uncle's insights, and even though Freud wasn't right about a lot by today's standards, his intuition was right in a lot of ways, about our unconscious and subconscious kind of, controlling us. And so his nephew basically took his uncle's insights and applied them to sales and marketing. And so he literally wrote the book on propaganda, how to influence public opinion to persuade. And he was very successful, so successful that after the World Wars, they had to change the name because it had such bad connotations once Hitler and Goebbels implemented it. So they had to change the name to public relations.
And did Hitler and Goebbels, did they use his book specifically?
They used his book.
Oh,
like
wow.
Hitler or Goebbels had his book on their shelf.
Wow.
He was very influential, and a lot of, they kind of took the basic ideas and made them evil.
Sure.
But it was the same, the same types of techniques that they applied, speaking to an emotion. So whether you're trying to sell soap to a housewife, and you're trying to evoke the emotion of, soft skin or pride in her appearance, or whatever those emotions that drive her beauty standards, Hitler and Goebbels just applied them to hating people. So instead of be clean with Dove soap, they were like, oh, look, the Jews are dirty. We should deport them. And that's where a lot of our regulation came after the wars. The Fairness Doctrine came after, trying to corral those impulses of mass indoctrination.
Yeah, because you do a great job with outlining all the types of like emotions that that are associated with all this stuff, and how historically the U.S. has made poor choices, but they've just shifted targets. You know, at one point
Yeah,
it was the Irish, then it was the Italians,
yes,
then it was
the
the
immigrants.
Native
Yeah,
Americans. And
it's what's funny, and when you look at it from a historical lens, it's like none of our political debates or conflicts are ever that new. They're just the faces change and some of the language may shift, but it's still the basic idea is there. There's still someone relying on other people's racial insecurities
yeah,
um, to either amass power or you know uh, or execute their political agenda in some way. And so, yes, throughout history, it's always somebody's always the scapegoat, whether it's Jews or Catholics or Irish immigrants or the
hmm
Chinese or the Japanese during World War II, Muslims 20 years ago
yeah.
or after 9/11, and then today it's more Mexicans and Hispanics.
And 100 years ago, you had to rely on the speed at which news could travel, which is a newspaper being printed in Boston and being distributed by horse across the country. It is on steroids right now. It is super fast because of the internet.
Yes,
And the
incredibly.
24-hour news cycle. Any minute, some breaking news can be. And FOMO makes us always want to be in the know. I need to know what's happening right now. Did it happen? Did I don't, is today the day that we get him or we get her, or this person, screws up in this way? And it is crippling to live like that.
Yeah. Well, and it's also, the information we're getting online, especially, we're not always seeing real information or what's factual. We're seeing again what's going to elicit the biggest emotional reaction. And
hmm
so even if that's a lie or if it's something that turns out not to be true, it almost doesn't matter online because what travels fastest is the emotional reaction.
And,
So
and,
the
and let's use,
correction
oh yeah, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
does not travel. Like,
Yeah,
so
right. Oh,
whenever that
totally.
lie is debunked, that's not going to travel.
And
Why? Because the correction doesn't make you angry or fearful.
And Joe fans, I promise you, I'm going to tie this into G.I. Joe. For one final example of this, talking about exactly what you just said, can you relay the hot coffee incident, which everyone listening knows what we're talking about, but not everyone listening knows the truth?
Oh, sure. That's kind of what I opened the book
Yep.
with. And we chose to open it because it's more of a corporate example that the vast majority of people just aren't really aware of. And I remember when this lawsuit happened. So you had this, a 79-year-old lady that spilled hot coffee in her lap, sued McDonald's. And at the time, the popular sentiment was that, she was at fault. Like, this is crazy, suing, a fast food company for spilling coffee in your own lap. Everybody thought that it was an example of a frivolous lawsuit. But the reason we think it's an example of a frivolous lawsuit is because of all of the front groups that McDonald's and other companies of hazardous products, all of the propaganda they kind of disseminated to turn popular opinion against the lady. And so the truth of the matter was, though, she wasn't driving, her grandson was, and she was simply trying to put she was simply trying to put sweetener or something in the coffee, and the cup literally collapsed. And the coffee was between like 180 and 190 degrees
Wow.
Fahrenheit.
Wow.
So, just for comparison, if you have a Keurig at home, that's between 120 and 140. So, 180 to 190 is very high, especially considering that like water boils at 212.
Yeah.
So anyway, so the damage that was done to her, like she was in so much pain, she went to the emergency room, she was in shock, hospitalized for a week. So she had like third degree burns, which is the worst you can get, and had to have serious grafting done in her crotch area. And because the damage was through the skin to subcutaneous fat, muscle, and bone. She burned
Wow.
like 16% of her body, was
Bone.
disabled for 2 years,
Wow.
and permanently disfigured. And you can, if you're brave enough, you can actually do a Google search and find the images of her legs and how bad they were burned. And it's pretty scary. Like it's the images are very disturbing. And so the thing is that McDonald's had already paid out like 700 claims in the previous years because their top coffee was too hot.
Wow.
And people constantly complained, and they never did anything about the coffee's temperature. And so, McDonald's definitely won this battle in the court of public opinion. Um, and we still think today that it was a frivolous lawsuit. But yeah, if you were to Google and look up the burns, the photos they took in the hospital of her, you would see this is so not a frivolous example.
Yeah, and your book goes into into all the ways that all the firms that they hired and all the PR, PR is propaganda that they actively sought to discredit her because the original judgment was so massive, and then they were able to get that judgment reduced, which then which I believe also led directly to tort reform.
Yes,
which protects companies from the damage that they actually do.
Yeah. So the goal with all of these AstroTurf organizations and front groups that were trying to downplay the coffee incident was tort reform. They were trying to get out of having to pay large sums to people that have been hurt by their products. And so think of all of the hazardous product manufacturers. So, and they were part of this campaign. So think the tobacco lobby, or any other industry.
Pesticides, probably.
Yeah, who's right. They were all kind of part of that hot coffee, the hysteria. Very few people end up knowing the truth. There's a great documentary called Hot Coffee.
Yeah, I've seen it.
It's fantastic. That was the first time I was like, oh my God, I can't believe, that more people don't know the real story here. So often, what we take for granted is really the corporate PR that has been so well sold to us.
Yeah.
And that's just coffee is a great example.
Yeah. So listeners, we're going to get going into the show, but I am going to wrap it and turn it around to G.I. Joe now. If this hasn't just helped you kind of think about it, I really hope it has. The book is How to Win the War on Truth. You can grab it off Amazon. Is there another venue that you'd want people to grab it, Samuel?
You could probably find it anywhere. It's pretty much everywhere online, even Target.com or Walmart.com.
Awesome.
Of course, however, if you buy it at your local independent bookseller, that's always best.
Always best.
You can pretty much find it everywhere.
Yeah, it's really, really well done. I can't say that enough. But now, why did this connect to G.I. Joe? Well, we're watching Renegades, and Renegades is, if you listeners are familiar with it, it is all of what we're talking about. Cobra is the propaganda machine. Cobra is a legitimate corporation in this iteration of G.I. Joe. They're not a terrorist organization. They are, but they're not an on the surface terrorist organization. They're Target. They're Amazon. They're Walmart. Yeah. They have their fingers in every aspect of this G.I. Joe version of the G.I. Joe universe. And as you watch Renegades, you see all the things that Samuel talks about in How to Win the War on Truth. You see it all happening in these episodes. And so that's what got us so excited to have you on the show.
Well, and when I first saw Renegades years ago, I remember thinking how, compared to the Real American Hero cartoon that we grew up on, how brilliant this reimagining was. And it's such a statement of the world that we now live in. So, the 80s series was very much good and bad, black and white, it was the U.S. military against a terrorist organization, right? So to reinvent this for a modern show, who are the worst bad guys at the moment? They're multinational corporations that seem to be immune from justice or accountability as they, destroy the planet, right? The Baroness isn't just an intelligence officer. What is she? She's a public relations person. Mm-hmm. She is the publicist, managing public perception and spinning all of the corporate BS, to make the consumers and the public none the wiser.
And I'll even throw in, by having them be renegades, the renegades from the U.S. military, you can't even trust the military in this iteration, like big
Right. Well,
government
and you
is
yeah,
questionable.
absolutely. Exactly. And so the fact that the good guys are, the outlaws or wanted, I think that's a real post 9/11 statement
Hmm.
about, when the show was conceived, the world we were living in was, two disastrous wars in the Middle East. Um, and, so there was a lack of trust in the US to be this kind of world protector,
Yeah.
considering we went to war under false pretenses and we killed hundreds of thousands of civilians and, to protect oil reserves. So, yeah, so the fact that the Joe team, the good guys, have to be outlaws to do the right thing, they have to work outside the system to save the world.
And speaking of
So,
Dick Cheney, I'm not even kidding you. The night before he passed away, I was reading the chapter the piece, the portion of your book that dealt with Dick Cheney and his role in that war. I literally I literally was reminded of all that and put it down, kind of being a little angry. And
yeah.
I woke up to the news the next morning that he had died.
Well,
I was like, I turned to Rebecca.
yeah.
I was like,
Well, and in case
something's up.
the listeners don't know what we're talking about. So basically, so Dick Cheney, the White House at the Bush years, would leak false intel to the New York Times. And again, this was after 9/11. So like journalists were kind of asleep at the wheel. Everybody was in shock after 9/11. Yep. So you trust your government, you trust whoever's in power during times of crisis. And so they failed to vet a lot of this info that was coming from the White House. So the White House was basically using the New York Times to put false intel. And then when the administration would go on Meet the Press, like Dick Cheney did, he could then point to the rumor that he planted in the New York Times as justification for whatever they were doing. And so, yeah, so the Dick Cheney has a call out in there.
And what you just said is verifiable. That's not a,
it's famous.
It's not like a rumor or a, this
Yeah.
person touches, he touches children, or they murdered this person for that kind of, for their own private needs, and they got away. That is what you're talking about, has actually been proven both like in court, in Congress, in front of people. People have asked why he wasn't brought up on charges, things like that. Like
war crimes. Yeah.
War crimes. Yeah. Like, so that is literally a fact. And yeah, it's shocking. So yes, I read that the night before he died. Make of that what you will. And then the other thing they have to do with Renegades is they're not terrorists. They had to kind of go in this direction. And I think it's a very smart way to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, again, they spoke to, all entertainment is very indicative of the time in which it's made and created, right? Yep. So when they created this show, this was, the believable premise for the world in which it existed, So, and I think that's still super relevant today, right? If you were going to, reinvent a Joe cartoon for kids, I don't think it would be that different. You would definitely have, Cobra be this multinational corporation that can get away with whatever they want. I love Baroness as the publicist is just, brilliant. But they do a really, genius, the whole series though does a really good job of imagining all of the characters we're familiar with from the franchise in very modern terms. And so like the episode we're about to watch, the Dreadnoks just being a biker gang who's stirring stuff up, of course, like it's just totally believable, and that's probably who they would be in real life, right?
Totally. Yeah. And I turned you on to the Paul Aller comic book series. I think were you able to read any of it?
I did. I read it, and it's very it's a shame, it was as short as it was. But it definitely has
same
the
notes.
Vibes of Renegades.
Yeah, same notes. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. The same kind of thing going on.
So that's awesome. So with that in mind, listeners, we're gonna watch the show. I hope this, I hope this hasn't bummed you out. What I want this episode to do, I'll say it again, I want this to empower everyone listening, wherever you're sitting in the world, whatever part of the world you believe, whatever state you're in. I want this to empower you to seek out more truth and to learn how to get your brain thinking more critically and more honestly. It's not homework, it's life, But this is a fun episode, though, because we're going to have a lot of fun because it is the Dreadnoks. We love the Dreadnoks. It's some good biker fun. It's good, bad guys come to town. It's like an episode of the A-Team this week, really. That's what we're watching. There's bad guys in town, and BA and the gang have to roll in and clear the deck. So we're going to get into it. Listeners, queue up your episode. It's G.I. Joe Renegades, Dreadnoks Rising. Is that the name? I can't remember.
I think so, right?
Dreadnoks Rising. Yes, Dreadnoks Rising. Episode 4. Call it up. It's actually available free on, I know it's free on Plex. It's free on a lot of places. So you should.
It's on YouTube.
Oh, it's also on YouTube. Great.
Yep, I found it on YouTube.
Yeah, so you should be able to get it. So Samuel, thank you so much for summarizing your book. The book is How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. All right, listeners, get ready with your press play button, whether it's on TV or whether it's on your computer or whether it's on your phone. And we're going to hit play in 1, 2, 3. So we open on this dusty town. Cowboy, like little guitar twang to set the mood. And we've got Torch, Ripper, and Buzzer, and Zartan pulling up. It's the traditional Dreadnoks. Now, Zartan does not look traditional.
Gents, here for a test drive?
They give him the orange cowl. It's a do-rag, but it evokes the orange cowl, so that's cool.
Not from around here, are
Maybe
you?
facial hair is the most evocative for Torch, Ripper, and Buzzer.
I'm Zartan.
And color of their hair. Otherwise,
I guess that's Rogue.
well, that's Rogue Pig, yeah. Otherwise, they don't really look like the other ones, and I'm not sure who that dude is. They're fun, though. I love the Dreadnoks, and you're so right. This is a great iteration. So they pull up to a used car lot, and they're messing with a guy named Russell,
Things don't happen to you. That's all
and they're
I have.
pulling a protection
Let me
racket,
just phone the missus to be
which
sure.
is, I would say something like an insurance company would do. I know certainly the mafia does this kind of stuff, but Samuel, how would this apply to the way an insurance company might work?
This time. Hey, which one's yours?
Like,
You make sure you insure for the biggest amount because you don't want to get hurt.
Oh.
Like you don't want
Right.
to risk your family getting hurt, and terrible things could happen to you. So you make sure you give us more money.
I mean, it's almost, you could say it's almost like being a used car salesman. Why don't you go for this one is safest, your kids will be safe in this one. Go for the highest model in a way, but yeah, insurance too, I guess. Yeah.
That's funny. And longtime Joe listeners, Cobra Commander started, or at least the main iteration, I think, the comic books. He started as a used car salesman, so I like that they're using this. I don't know if that was a purposeful connection. I do have to question, though, and I've watched enough Mafia shows, is they're, like, they just roll up and they blow up Russell's personal car, and they threaten the whole business, and they take all of his money. Like, if they're running a protection racket, aren't you supposed to take like some of his money and maybe not destroy his business so that he can then make more money and not just, die?
I guess they're punishing him,
I guess so. Yeah. He had the
In typical
temerity.
Dreadnok fashion, they're just destroying stuff.
Yeah. Not saying they're smart. So that's totally in line and in character. He had the temerity to ask, hey fellas, how can I help you?
And this is their story.
We've talked about the opening before in these other shows. I think it's precise. It's to the point. It gives you all the, it gives you all the characters you need, and they don't waste any time. They get right to it.
Well,
So now here comes a small town sheriff.
maybe the guy with the dreadlocks is supposed to be Burnout.
Yeah, it might be right. Yeah, which is a
don't know
later
where he came in,
Dreadnok.
yeah.
I always. I don't know everything, but what I know is like pre-'89. So
Yes,
a lot of the
agreed,
later
same.
figures, late teens and early 2000s figures. That's it's a little lost on me, and I'm not known for my research. In fact, Samuel, you should be complimented, I guess. Yours is the most research I think I've done for almost any interview. Like,
Oh wow.
yeah,
I'm on.
this is a casual let's hang out and talk GI Joe show, but I figured I had to do some homework for this one.
Oh,
so
well, I'm glad you did.
Yeah,
Thank
well,
you.
it definitely paid off, and so the Joes show up. Happenstance happens to be the same town.
We'll be on our best
And
behavior.
listeners, you also know
Promise.
I don't watch ahead of this, so like in this case, I don't think the Dreadnoks are associated with Cobra. Like, they're not showing an outright association with them, so I don't know how they're going to be used in the future of of this show. So, spoiler alert: they may not come back for 10 episodes. I have absolutely no idea about that. But in this case, they just seem to be a biker gang that's causing. Think Brando and was it the what's his big biker? The Wild One. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The cop comes in. He's rattled. He's got he's sweet on the waitress, of course.
Come on, Wendy. You don't have to call me sheriff.
Can't help it when I see
Oh,
you
it's
in
Wendy
uniform.
and Sheriff.
Maybe you should see me out of this uniform. Well, no, I mean, in street clothes. What?
That's a little innuendo. It's a little rough. No one wants to see you out of those clothes, Sheriff. But here they come, the Dreadnoks. So we got some action coming on. So one of the connections I wanted to make with this show, this episode specifically in G.I. Joe, is the idea that as we get to the end of this episode, I'm jumping ahead because if I wait, we won't have time to discuss it, is the problem is an outside force impacting their way of life. And the only way that these guys are able to save the day is for themselves to stand up to the Dreadnoks, right? Like to take the reins in to flip it on the war on truth, and instead of just accepting the way it is, but to actually get critical about it and to point out, or to not even point out, because I don't think everyone needs to be an activist, but to in your own life make conscious choices about the things you believe, the things that you share. More importantly, think about things. Are they vetted? Do they seem real? Is it just an opinion piece, or is it an actual piece of news? And that's sort of where this episode leads to, of if they don't stand up for themselves, they're not going to get out of this bind, because G.I. Joe's eventually going to leave, and they're just going to keep running into trouble. Do you find that as maybe a way out of the propaganda problem that the world finds itself in today?
Yeah, and I would think, as you were saying that and watching it, I was also thinking how, the solution is collective, right?
Yeah.
They're each being targeted or terrorized individually, but the only way they're out of it is they all come together and work together to tackle the Dreadnoks. So the fact that, we're all in this together and individual actions might not work, but if we're all on the same page, then we could all address the problem.
Yeah.
Right.
We should be upset that people are lying to us or presenting news or presenting opinion as news.
And with the purpose of dividing,
right?
Like, so often when it comes to the political lies, the tactic is to divide. If you, there's an old axiom that if you can convince the working classes to fight amongst themselves, then they won't challenge the ruling classes.
Yep.
And that's kind of been true throughout history, right?
Yep.
So,
speaking of fighting amongst themselves, we just had a small moment of that where, so the Dreadnoks without Zartan got scared off by Snake Eyes because he's awesome. But then now Zartan showed back up and was like, don't get out of line, town people. And one of them told the other one, like, get out of here. Like, we don't need your help. And that's the kind of thing that you're talking about combating. we all need to be a part of it. We all need to help. We need to accept the help of other people. We need to accept the opinions, but we need to accept the just a communal effort to fight against this. For real,
Well, and working
the news channel.
You can't solve problems if you can't agree on them.
Yes.
Right. So
there were many moments in the last, we'll just say 10 years, where I've been watching the news channel that my wife and I both watch, and I would get upset with the news, and I would call BS, because even though they're saying something that, emotionally I agree with, but I'd get upset because I'm like, that's not news. They're just
right.
They're presenting themselves as
a lot of opinion.
So much
opinion journalism minus the journalism.
Yeah, and it would really bother me a lot. And that's all we're talking about.
To me, one of the biggest sins of the media is that, the news media is that they don't platform experts. They're platforming the cheerleaders for positions instead of just cutting through the BS and, talking to the economist or the social scientist or whoever. Like, that's what I yell at when I watch the news.
Yeah, and a lot of it is like
the
filling
economist.
time.
Yeah.
So there may be a grain of truth, but if they just report that grain of truth, it's a minute of the story. So they pad out 10 minutes of, you're not going to believe this.
Right.
And again, any of the channels do this. And then they get to the actual meat of the truth, and it might actually be true. But you've riled me up. You've gotten everyone's dander up. And so when whatever the fact is, you've laid the runway for their emotion and how they're going to react, not giving them that slow thought chance to absorb the news and really have their own opinion on it, and really go, well, okay, the taxes are going up, but I might actually be okay with that because I'm a small business owner and I think blah, 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 whatever. But leading into it is, you're going to be crazy upset because the taxes are going up,
Yeah. Or, not clarifying that maybe they're only going up on billionaires.
Oh, right. Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. More to the
all
truth.
The while. Right?
Exactly. Yeah. The actual facts of it versus just that top headline, Yeah.
Yeah. But but with that headline, the billionaires benefit by making everybody think that they're going up. So you should oppose this.
Correct. And
so much manipulation.
So much. We could do a whole nother episode on billionaires. So maybe we'll have you back. Maybe when we get to like a specific like Tomac, Zaymot, Destro kind of episode.
Is there an episode where Cobra's off hiding all their money in tax havens?
Yeah, exactly.
Offshoring jobs and replacing workers with AI.
Let's not sugarcoat that. That is a massive problem. But man, there's only so much time Joe on Joe has. But the Dreadnoks kidnap the waitress, and Snake Eyes, again, he's the king. He's gonna go free them. What's your so you grew up at G.I. Joe, right?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
We watched the cartoon. I read the comics growing up. Loved the Larry Hama stuff.
Oh, love it.
My brother was a big G.I. Joe fan. He had all the toys. I had the comics, and we both kind of watched the cartoon growing up.
Amazing. What were your favorites, like characters or vehicles? Or
Snake Eyes and Scarlet for the comics. For the cartoons, Flint and Lady J probably. Although my, probably Roadblock and Gung Ho are my faves too. Mostly because Gung Ho's from Louisiana, which is where I grew up, and then Roadblock is from Biloxi, Mississippi, which is not that far, and it's kind of near where my mom lives now, pretty close to Biloxi. So I always felt like Gung Ho and Roadblock were my reps, my representatives in the Joe team. Yeah.
Did you love that episode with the Red Rocket where Roadblock's, I believe it was his grandparents or aunt and uncle, ran the restaurant and it was all about them cooking and stuff?
Yes, I remember. Yeah. I was always very entertained by Roadblock in the cartoon. He was always one of my favorites.
He's so great. So now the Joes are showing everyone very much like an episode of the A-Team. I was not lying about that. That was truth. the
Yeah.
Joes, the Joes are setting up traps and stuff. Snake Eyes has been caught, and it's a great scene. It's that moment of disarm him, and every weapon under the sun comes out of his uniform. Which is always
Somehow, I
hilarious
don't know
to
where he
see.
was hiding them, but
Yeah.
Come on. Give me
Was
something
I
to
just
work with here. What's the fun of
I was just
torturing
watching
you
something that
if
had
I
that
can't
gag in it,
imitate
and
your
it's
screams?
always entertaining. Speaking of crazy weapons, just throwing this out there. This is a few weeks after it aired. Predator Badlands, amazing, listeners. If you didn't see it, catch it on pay-per-view.
You have to own them. That's
Hulu. I think
why
it's on Hulu,
was
right?
rather
Yeah,
No,
probably will
maybe
be.
not.
Yeah,
Their
it's great.
Maybe not yet. Maybe
Yeah.
not yet.
voice,
So,
their
what I like about this is Zartan being the leader is teaching them.
keep the mask.
Like he's smart. He's not just a thug, and he's kind of like telling them how to beat your enemy and how to mentally break them down. Under the guise of because he's Zartan, like taking their identity. Like he said, like I like to take a piece of them. It makes it sweeter.
Oh, I didn't even think about that tying into his character
Yeah.
about being a chameleon, and that's true. That was a great little thing to add in from the writers.
Yeah, and I don't know if eventually we get a Zartan here that does chameleon stuff. I'm assuming we do because they're so great. Why would you just do episodes about them just being random bikers? But it's a great way to tie it in.
So, have you not watched the entire series?
Never seen these. Never seen them.
Really?
Yep.
Oh, you're in
And-
for a treat.
Yeah, and I'm doing that on purpose so it's really fresh to me. And I'm loving it so far. This is great.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun as
So
it
much
goes
fun.
along.
Yeah. Snake Eyes just
yeah.
pulled up, tied in chains to the back of a tow truck, which is an amazing visual.
Let you push these people around.
Ooh, just ordinary Joes who want to play hero.
Yeah, and
And
Zartan's
even the fact
imitating
that,
Duke.
that he's wearing the cowboy hat, the sheriff's hat, which
Uh-huh.
looks like a cowboy hat, really underscoring the whole Western outlaw.
Yeah.
Outlaws terrorizing a little town. The musical cues keep popping up.
Yeah, and really no Cobra in this. Like that's what's neat about it.
No, I don't think there is any.
Not
Yeah,
at all.
It's yeah.
But they're all teaching them the A-team tactics, the guerrilla tactics. Hidden. We got spikes to stop the motorcycles, ropes that cut across to knock them off. The waitress is freeing the sheriff, things like that. Yeah, it's all very very much like a Western. So you worked at Lucasfilm on Star Wars. Let's go circle
did.
back to
I
that. What
managed-
did you do for the Star Wars franchise?
I managed product development for collectibles. So I worked on pretty much anything that looked like a toy but was not a toy. So
During what years?
Sideshow's product, Gentle Giant's product.
Amazing.
From till like 2014, 15 is when I left. So yeah, pretty much from like 2000 till then, till 2015, I worked on for all the
great.
Sideshow stuff during that period. Most of the Gentle Giant. I did managed Hallmark ornaments. And
Oh my God,
the
dude.
bobbleheads.
We're about to put up my Christmas tree. When this airs, I believe it'll be either around Christmas or after Christmas. My Christmas tree is 100% Hallmark or Hallmark Star Wars
Yeah.
ornaments. That's all I have.
Yeah,
My
we did
mother
a lot
gave
of
them
cool
to me
ones.
for the last
Yeah.
30 years.
Oh wow!
Continues to give them to me. She's amazing. And I have so many lightsabers on my tree. It's ridiculous.
Oh wow! Nice. Yeah,
So I
we
definitely
did no
was supporting your
shortage of-
work.
Yeah, Star Wars ornaments. And yeah, now they've got a cool subline going where it's the vintage Star Wars action figures, where they're doing a different one each year.
Oh, cool.
Like a mini version of it on the car.
Oh, yes. I've seen those. Yep.
Yeah, super.
I really
cool.
like the I guess it's like the movie scenes that they did where the whole tree
Yes.
would tell the whole story. They were all electronically connected.
Yeah.
That
Those
was
have
an
been pretty
impressive
cool,
like
yeah.
line.
Yeah, we did a lot of cool stuff. Yeah, when I worked on those, and I did a lot of international stuff too. Tomy Kubrick's Metacom stuff. Yeah, a lot of like smaller tchotchke kind
That's
of
great.
things.
So on the show,
trying to
Snake
think,
Eyes has escaped, and he is dismantling the Dreadnoks one by one. foot kicks. His sword is stronger than their machete. He slices torches, fuel line. Like he's Snake Eyes. That's what we're here for. That's what I want. I'm a front runner. I'm not gonna lie about that. The propaganda of Snake Eyes worked on me. Well, that's actually something I wanted to get into, but the real world, the modern world is so pressing. The Joe toys, that was all television propaganda and cartoons to sell the toys and to work on your
because they
mind.
deregulated. There's a recent book or two about deregulating the advertising and so that these basically 30-minute long commercials for toys could happen. It was because of deregulation in the 70s and 80s. However, though, I will say for Joe, at least they hired like real writers. It wasn't just like, let's just put all this stuff in. Like they hired, real Hollywood writers who had, worked in TV. So the stories kind of hold up still.
I agree.
Though,
I defend it anytime it comes up, like, whatever conversation people, you do a G.I. Joe podcast, whatever. 100%. This show stands out as being a show building the adventure, which would make you want to join the adventure or, have your own versus, hey, these are toys, go buy them.
Right. And they all had, distinct like personalities and voices that made them fun. There was a real sense of humor about it, which I think I really gravitated towards as a kid.
And even besides the PSAs, they taught lessons, about being nice to people and treating people of different backgrounds well, things like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the PSAs were, basically what the toy companies made them tag on at the end to see like, oh, look, see, it's
yep.
It's good children's fare. But for the most part, even without that, the heroism and the good versus evil is still usually a positive message.
Yeah, totally. So on the show, it's kind of wrapping up. The Joes have left town. The sheriff is now friends with the car people, with the waitress. Like everyone's cool. And Flint and Lady J, hot on the trail of the Renegades, has shown up and been like, we're looking for the Joes. And everyone's like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Well, and it's probably worth noting that the Flint in this series is probably the only time we've seen him in any G.I. Joe fare where he's actually a warrant officer.
Yeah.
Like that is his role in this, which, I don't feel like that was ever demonstrated in any of the content.
In the old version, like the old show, there were the levels of, leadership were just all over the place. Like,
it didn't make any sense.
Especially like you'd have, snow people going on desert adventures. And like there's whatever your specialty was. It was more of like what personality.
I like the people with, like hardly wearing any shirt would be in the snow.
Send quick kick up there. Yeah. Which
barefoot.
I like leading personality first from an entertainment perspective. But it would often cause like, what's that guy doing? What's she doing on this trip? There's no need for that,
Right. No, this has made me want to, watch some more of these. I haven't watched them since they, were out. So I should watch a few more.
Well, I hope we've sparked a little rewatch for you. I know they're all available in various forms online and stuff, and they're not terribly hard to find. But more importantly, I hope we've sparked a creative, an interest for all the listeners to reassess where we are at as a society as it pertains to media literacy, truth, believability, and just sifting through what the actual facts are of situation. Facts are facts. They don't, I had a boss that said, was it numbers don't lie, but liars, or figures don't lie, but liars do figure, I think the more we do this, that slow thinking, I think we're going to be in a better place. And the fast thinking has its place, fight or flight, I get it. But in the downtime, do a little bit more of that slow thinking for everybody listening. And I think we might find ourselves in a better place. Do you have an optimistic lookout, or are we?
Yeah,
all
I mean, I would
doomed?
say, we talked a lot about emotions earlier, that I would always say be very emotionally aware when it comes to social media and being online. And recognize if you read a headline or if you see a post, recognize the emotional response that you are having. Because if it's stirring up anger or hate or something like that, yeah, that should be a red flag that you're probably being manipulated. And so, be more cautious and skeptical of those types of incendiary posts.
Yeah, I think that's very wise. And man, I've enjoyed this conversation. Samuel Spitale, How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. I believe I've said that 7 times as per recommended in your book.
Right. So, yeah. The rule of 7.
The rule of 7 for advertising.
Have to hear it 7 times for it to sink in.
Just in case, How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. Get them at any bookstore, the few that remain, or online. Local bookstores support them. Samuel, thank you so much for... Oh, wait! I'm so out of some practice with this stuff. One of the traditions when we do the viewing episodes is we ask our guests, if you were a member of the G.I. Joe team or Cobra team, you could be good or bad, what would you be? What would your specific specialty be? And then what's your code name? I'll help you along with the code name. Don't worry, I'm not,
Oh, I already have a code name.
Awesome!
Well, so when I worked at Lucasfilm, I had friends that worked at Hasbro on the Joe line. And so I used to always, beg them to make a Joe character for me. So I was going to be from Baton Rouge or somewhere along the Mississippi River. And then my code name would be Mudbug, because of mudbugs, what they call crawfish in the muddy waters of the Mississippi.
Awesome.
And then, I don't know if I ever really had a specialty, but if I was being realistic about it, it would probably be, intelligence or reconnaissance or something like that.
100% Mudbug. Welcome to the Joe on Joe team.
Thank you.
2, I'd say this. Here's why because this show Renegades is very much like, let's give you a nickname and here's why. You're breaker because you break things. Mudbug, because you're from the swamps, but you get in the mud, you infiltrate all the message boards, the deep Reddit threads, it was part of your counterintelligence stuff. Like, you get into those subcultures, like you get dirty. So they call you Mudbug. How about that?
I like that. That's actually great.
Awesome. Well,
And
Mudbug.
I was thinking here it was, I needed to be like literally in the mud, trudging through very harsh terrain or something.
No, you get terrible internet reception in the mud. Come on.
True.
You got to do your job.
Yeah. I prefer to be wherever there's air conditioning.
Oh, you got to keep the servers cool, so you're in. Samuel Spitale, How to Win the War on Truth, an illustrated guide to how mistruths are sold, why they stick, and how to reclaim reality. Thank you so very much for being on Joe on Joe.
Thank you for having me. It was great to be here. And if anybody wants to reach out or follow me, you can pretty much find me at Samuel C. Spitale on any of the social media platforms.
Do it. And now you Joe, and Joeing is half the battle.